Well, good evening and welcome to Canberra Decides, an election debate with a difference where you will also get to vote in the audience. This is a collaboration between Region Media, the Riot Act, Lonsdale St Studios and me, Genevieve Jacobs. I'm now the CEO of Hands Across Canberra. And I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of this place, the Ngunnawal people, and others with deep ties to this beautiful country. I pay my respects to elders past and present who also gathered here, debated and decided issues over millennia. In a series of debates over the next 3 weeks, we're going to look at the cost of living, we're going to look at Canberra's future, and tonight, what drives business and our economy. 4 politicians are on the hook. Tonight, it's Liberals Deputy Leader and Member for Yerrabi Leanne Castley, Independents for Canberra candidate and candidate for Ginninderra Leanne Foresti, Greens candidate in Kurrajong Jillian Reid, and for Labor in Kurrajong, Martin Greenwood. Welcome to you all. Terrific to have you here. But wait, there's more. We've also assembled an expert panel, and tonight in the studio I'm joined by ACCOS Head Dr Devon Bowles, by Canberra Business Chamber Chair Archie Sirimokos, and by long-time political journalist and author Professor Chris Wallace. They'll be asking questions, and so will you. Now, go to it live if you're watching us on Facebook. We're harvesting those questions and we'll feed them into the debate as we go along. I never promise to get to every question. We can't. There are usually absolutely dozens, and some of them are not necessarily a great fit with the theme. But please send those questions through and know that they're coming straight through to me. We'll cover as much territory as we possibly can over this next hour. And we also want you to vote live. This is an interactive forum using Slido, which is a really simple system. I think some of you have probably used it at work events. It's pretty functional and easy to use. Just scan the QR code that you can see on your screen, or if you've got your device open, go to a new tab, slido.com, and enter the code 2804134. That's 2804134, and Slido is currently on your screens. You can vote from there, and I'm going to ask you to vote several times. That Slido QR and code will be in the bottom right-hand corner as a watermark right through the debate. And our first voting question, as you're setting that up, go to it now. Who are you planning to vote for in the forthcoming ACT election? Is it Labor? Is it the Liberals? Are you voting Green? Are you going for an independent? Not necessarily any of these guys. They might not even be in your electorate, but how are you intending to vote? And I'll share those results live as they come in. But first, we're going to give these pollies and would-be pollies a go at the stump. They've got 2 minutes, and it is 2 minutes. I'll get the shepherd's crook out if I have anyone straying away from that. To make a pitch to you, the voter. No interjections, no questions, so let's go to it. And Jill, you are first for the Greens. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So yes, I'm Jillian Reid, Greens candidate in Kurrajong. So my career has largely been in financial services, specialising in sustainable investment since 2011 in Sydney and in London, presenting to boards and now leading an investment management team. So we have a fiduciary duty to thousands of superannuation fund members and other beneficiaries. And in that role, it includes assessing environmental and social issues and anticipating change and what the financial impacts could be from a risk and a return point of view. So when we think about an economic system, the purpose of that system is to meet people's needs, their rights. So housing, nutrition, education, and recognising that the environment, we have dependencies on that environment to support that purpose. That's why I'm a big fan of adopting a circular economy approach. It just makes sense to design out waste, to value materials for longer and regenerate nature so that we can deliver on people's needs for many decades to come. So that's why the Greens' vision is that our national capital is a progressive place that we're proud of, that actually looks after each other and takes climate and environment crisis seriously. And currently we're facing multiple crises in people's ability to afford essentials, food, housing, plus multiple environmental crises. The current system is not working. Labor's business as usual approach to pulling the budget levers is tinkering at best. It's failing to see the magnitude of the issues that we face. So the Greens platform is committing to invest sensibly in a thriving economy, in connected solutions that go to the root cause of multiple issues. So for example, 10,000 homes, including 5,000 in the new suburb, and GP bulk billing and a more regular electric public transport system. And all of this is possible if you vote for it.
Shepherd's Crook is inches away from you. Leanne Castley, off you go.
Hi, thanks, Genevieve. Look, we often hear that Canberra is a public service town, and that is true and a very important part of Canberra. But business employs over 60% of Canberrans. It's massive, massive impact in our town. Now, the government tells us that we have the highest rate of businesses starting up here in Canberra, which is excellent news. And often the government will use that to say, hey, things are thriving, we're doing great. But what they don't tell you is that we also have the highest rate of insolvencies and businesses closing. And just a couple of stats from the Canberra Business Chamber Business Beat survey. Back in June 2024, 24% of businesses expected their business to grow. Only 24% in the current climate here in Canberra. And only 50% reported that they got their targets. So I want us to think about business as people. It's not a thing. It is your neighbour, your aunt, your mum, your family. And so when we see the city with all of the boarded up shops closing down, they're families that have gone through hell and back to make sure they can provide services to Canberrans and then have to close the doors due to many circumstances. Now, many of the reasons why businesses are failing in Canberra is because we have the highest payroll tax rate. We have high workers' compensation. We have public liability insurance is very expensive. You know, one of the hospitality businesses in my electorate of Yerrabi told me that lettuce used to be $9 a kilo. It's now $30. That's why your burgers have gone up in price. My experience with business is I've owned and run businesses. This is the first time a government has ever paid me as a full-time employee. And so I know what it's like to have to wake up every day and to turn up and work in your business. And as I say, it is people, and often in the small businesses in town, you are the one that is the HR team. You are also the admin person, and you are the marketing person. So we need a government that says yes to business and yes to letting you make that work in any way that you can.
Okay, well done. On time. Okay, Leanne Foresti, go ahead.
Thank you to Region Media and Genevieve Jacobs for hosting the event tonight. I want to also acknowledge the other candidates who have kindly come along and to contribute to the discussion. So my name is Leanne Foresti. I'm a candidate for the Independence for Canberra movement representing my electorate of Ginninderra. I am the mother of 4 children and I have lived in Ginninderra on and off for over 38 years. My husband and I own and operate a small concrete remediation business and have been servicing Canberra for almost a decade. My journey started in 2021. I was fed up with the impacts the worsening skills and labour shortages was having on small businesses in the ACT, in particular subcontractors. The inability to attract and retain skilled workers in the ACT was impacting our ability to grow and survive. So Canberra, like Leanne said, is more than just a public service town. 63% of jobs in Canberra are in the private sector. 97% of Canberra businesses are small, family-owned enterprises employing less than 20 people. We are the drivers of the economic growth and jobs creation in the territory. With the ongoing labour shortages and the increased costs associated with running a business in the ACT, businesses are choosing to either close their doors or remain small and agile to survive. 50% of small businesses are not even breaking even. Okay, so what I'm hearing from the small business community is that there's no incentive to have a small business in the ACT. We know that when we have a thriving business community, we have a stronger economy, and which that means that we have a better support for our health, education, housing systems in delivering better outcomes.
Thank you very much indeed, Leanne. Martin Greenwood.
Thanks Genevieve. Martin Greenwood, Labor candidate for Kurrajong. I'd like to present a slightly more positive case than has been made by the others. The ACT has seen 34 years of uninterrupted economic growth. In this term of the ACT Labor government, there has been a 22% increase in the number of businesses in the ACT. That is the fastest rate of growth in Australia. That is a higher increase than any other state or territory. This year, the ACT has had 4% gross state product growth, while the rest of Australia has been at about 3%. We have consistently delivered the strongest labour market in Australia with the lowest rate of unemployment. That does create some challenges. And something that I'm particularly proud of, and one of the reasons why I got into politics, was we also have the lowest level of inequality in our economy in the ACT. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it does mean it can be hard to find, and it means that we need to target our support and our services appropriately. Right now, inflation and particularly interest rates are biting. I definitely hear that on the doors. I hear that from the business owners that I talk to, that people are spending less. And I'm a single dad with a mortgage. I definitely feel that myself as well. But that's why I think we need a positive vision for our economy. We need a vision for a diverse economy with a broader array of jobs, and that larger economy can support more cost of living support for Canberrans. As has been said, the public sector is a fantastic base for the ACT economy. But what you have seen throughout this Labor government is that every year the economy has grown, the private sector has grown as a larger proportion of the ACT economy. The ACT government has been actively involved in increasing diversification of our economy, from companies like Skycraft, who have been supported to build satellites here that are now in space, all the way through to small restaurants like Onziem in Kingston that have received grants to transition to zero emissions cooking. The ACT Labor Party has a positive vision for a growing economy.
And you're out of time. Thank you very much indeed, Martin. And I've got the results for you from our very first poll. We are looking at 39% for the Canberra Liberals on the question of who you'd vote for this time. 23% unsure or undecided. Independents for Canberra 15%, ACT Greens 15% and ACT Labor 8%. I can't tell you what the sample size is, but we're going to see if this changes during the course of the debate. And it's time for the next vote. Based on what you've heard, who pitched best? What pitch impressed you most on Canberra's business sector and economy? And if you want to go to Slido again, the QR code right there on your screens as the watermark, or in a new tab, slido.com, and the code 2804134. And you can vote for the people who are in the studio with us. But we're going to go to the Q&A section. I've got a bunch of questions that I'll ask, and then I'll go to our expert panel as well. I'm going to start with an analysis of where we are now and an economy that's in transition from its public service base, a city that is looking to build a knowledge economy, a place with high incomes that keep the city ticking, the economy's ticking, even while hospitality and retail are feeling the pinch. Leanne Castley, I'm going to start with you. Why is any of that a problem? Why is any of it something you can slate to the ACT government rather than national economic trends?
Look, there's no doubt there are sectors in the ACT that are thriving, but there are a bunch that aren't. We hear from some businesses that say it's almost harder now than it was in COVID. And I'll refer again to the business chamber, and a lot of media reported out of the last budget that the ACT had the lowest investment in business by the ACT government than any other jurisdiction. It wasn't just low, it was far below the line. And my dealings with the ACT government during many budgets now, the 4 years I've been in Parliament, is that this expectation that business just must pivot and deal with whatever the government throws at them. And there is a certain attitude towards business that, you're almost welcome, you're lucky you get to do business here. And our business owners here in Canberra are saying that that's just too tough. You must come at us with, an option to make things easier, ease that regulation, and then things will ease up a little bit in that sector.
Okay, so it's all about regulation.
It's so much regulation.
And small business being the engine that would drive this economy.
Yeah.
Okay. Martin Greenwood, that's not necessarily what the government is telling us. The government is pivoting towards some investment in high tech and very much investment in education. They're hoping that this knowledge transition will land. But essentially, Labor's also stuck with finite resources. It's surviving on property tax and land sales. Now, is that genuinely a path to the future?
I think so. I think the investments that the ACT government has made in business, and some of them have been fairly substantial, have seen the economy grow. I mean, I've given you the statistics, we have an incredibly well-performing economy. I think the focus really should be on how do we ensure that economic growth and that economic success is fairly shared amongst all Canberrans. I think it's interesting that both the Independents and the Liberals have proposed repealing payroll tax. There's only 3,000 businesses in the ACT that pay payroll tax. They're generally multinational and national corporations. The ACT, while it has a high rate of payroll tax, has the highest threshold. So it doesn't come in until you have a payroll over $2 million. In New South Wales, that's at 1.2. So in the ACT, we create much more space for small and medium businesses to get going, to establish, and we tax those who are the largest. It's Woolies, it's the banks, those are the people that pay the tax, and that enables us to provide more services for Canberrans.
Okay, Leanne Foresti, you're from a small business background yourself. Is the government clearly focused on this as an economic engine? And give me some examples as to how you would help small business rather than government and large enterprises to thrive. I want to throw in a question that we've harvested from our audience. One of Canberra's oldest family businesses, the Cusacks, and we all know the Cusacks, right, have cited the high cost of doing business in the ACT as a reason for moving operations out of the capital. We do have the highest commercial rates in the country, other company taxes such as payroll tax, although Martin's just said there's very few people who actually pay payroll tax by comparison with the size of the business sector. Tell me what you're actually going to do to encourage business growth.
Well, can I speak to the point about the payroll tax? Construction within the ACT actually provide a large economic boost. They contribute a lot to the ACT economy. And what we're seeing is that they also employ the majority, they rely heavily on subcontractors. So what I would say to that is that, you know, by reducing payroll tax, we're enabling construction businesses within the AC to thrive and to be able to deliver on housing and infrastructure projects. That is a big economic issue. I know subcontractors are not being currently supported in the ACT. We do not have really stringent security of payments laws. People have been hit by 3 major insolvencies through RORC, project coordination and PBS. So a lot of the people and colleagues that I know have been detrimentally affected by that. In terms of growth, I think the only way that we could really grow is absolutely concentrate on the biggest economic drivers, which are small business and construction within the ACT. By helping out bigger businesses, they're more inclined to employ people locally and not turn to outsourcing that over the border. And we see that an over-reliance in the ACT on subcontractors, particularly in government as well as construction.
Jill Reid, let me go to you. This is a wealthy town. Prices are very high here. 40,000 Canberrans live in poverty. 10,000 of those are children. There are people who don't have enough to eat in a cold winter. But you need a viable, energetic economy to give people jobs. Will the Greens prioritise small business growth that we need to diversify the economy? And how would you do it?
So the Greens are certainly a fan of small business. It is people, as you said, that run small business. I think the way we speak about this, it seems that small business is some kind of separate category. No, they are the individuals that are running families and have children that need to go to childcare, and a lot of what we're also hearing from small business is that they need workers. So part of this is actually thinking about, and this is really our main point, is how do we join this up? This isn't small business as a separate topic. This is lots of different sectors, individuals that are trying to run businesses that need workers, and those workers need houses, and they need childcare, and they need a place for their kids to go to school. So we need to think about the role that small business plays alongside the private sector and bigger private sector and the public sector, but think about all of the services that they need and the roles that then creates, and the new business and new working opportunities that creates as well. So we need to join it up and not think of it as small business as a homogenous separate group, because that's not how this works.
Leanne Castley, I want to come back to you with a question from the audience, which is, do you support providing fairness by ensuring that Canberra's wealthiest pay their share of payroll tax, just the same as retailers and hospitality workers?
Of course. So when we talk about cutting payroll tax, that's purely for GPs. So there was a piece of legislation that came in, and it was implemented across the ACT that GPs had to pay an additional payroll tax, as Martin said over there, that $2 million, which we saw a direct impact to people going to the GP from your increase would be about $7 to $20. So of course, those people earning money, there is payroll tax to be paid, of course. It's important to understand the regulation levers that the government could use to ease the burden of running a business in the ACT. They set up a better regulation task force, and the first order of business was to learn how to talk to business about how to talk to business. And what we see through this strategy is that very little regulation has actually been eased across the ACT, and so that's something that we would certainly look at.
I'll give you a moment to respond before I go to our
It's just, I mean, your opening statement, you criticised the ACT government payroll tax regime, but the only change you'll make to the payroll tax regime is for GPs?
No. So, payroll tax is the one that we've come out and said would be, yes, repealing that GP payroll tax and then looking at it broader. I'm certainly not going to announce any policies here tonight for you, Martin, but it's important to understand that there's a broader scope to be looked at here as to how business can cope. For instance, the construction, the new laws that have come in, there's over 100 pieces of legislation for the construction industry to get their head around. As I said, most of these businesses have 1 or 2 employees, and to understand that and move forward in business is an absolute burden that the construction industry cannot cope with.
Okay, I'm going to pull you up there, Leanne, because we do want to go to our expert panel, and we've got Archie Sirimokos from the Business Council, the Business Chamber, sitting right there in front of us. Archie, what's your question?
There's a lot being said about payroll tax, and it's the most regressive negative tax that any government can impose. Is there an over-reliance on payroll tax in the ACT?
Martin?
Well, it's the opposite of a regressive tax, in that it has the highest threshold. The larger the business that you are, the more that you pay. It's not a regressive tax. I think that's pretty important to establish as a baseline. You only start paying it at the point that you have a payroll over $2 million, and you only pay for every dollar that you have in payroll over $2 million. It's a well-established, quite an efficient tax, and we have to have taxes to fund things, so it is an efficient tax.
So what's the incentive for business to continue to employ people?
Because the ACT has a thriving economy. We have an unemployment rate at close to 0. We have 4% year-on-year economic growth. We have, Canberra is a fantastic place. I mean, I walk around, I think it is absolutely wonderful. You know, Leanne implied that there are boarded up windows going up all over the city. I walk from Lonsdale Street, Hague Park and Lonsdale Street, all the way into the city, and almost every single business that you walk past is a locally owned Canberra business. I'm representing Kurrajong. I'm not going to talk for other parts of the city, but that's my experience of Canberra. I think it's a fantastic place to live and a fantastic place to do business.
Devon Bowles, I want to go to you. I know you're concerned about the expanding Australian wealth gap. Your question to the panel.
Yeah, the wealth gap has expanded dramatically across Australia in the last few years. Not least due to a taxation system that at times favours investments over labour. Do you think the ACT government has a role in reducing the wealth gap? And if so, how would you do this?
Leanne Foresti, I'm going to go to you on that one.
Look, personally, what we need to be doing is being able to support small businesses, and by removing barriers, and they are in the form of paying really high taxes, insurance premiums. They're also paying ridiculous rent for properties across Canberra. And I just spoke to somebody in Braddon the other who had transitioned his business to a food van because he could no longer, look after the associated costs. That's the costs associated with running a business, in particular in hospitality in the ACT. So, what we need to be doing, the investment in small businesses to enable them to be able to employ people. They're the ones that are being hit the hardest, being able to, they're mums and dads. People get into small business or business in general just to secure the financial future of their families. And currently, there are no profits being made. Their quality time with families has suffered. So in general, the mental and emotional health of small family business owners is in the toilet right now. We need to do more to remove barriers, enable for them to grow their businesses, in particular find skilled people to come to the ACT. And once we start growing businesses and supporting them, then the whole reason why a lot of people are suffering is because we're just not getting enough support. You're talking to small business owners in shops and things, and they're not earning enough money, and they're thinking, okay, you know what, I might as well just go to another state because it's just not viable for me to be looking after my family here in the ACT.
Jill Reid, what's your response on this? And with particular reference to the size of that wealth gap, which is really pernicious in the ACT because we've got a large number of people that are pretty comfortable and then a very big space and some really poor people at the bottom.
So let's flip this and think, who's buying from small businesses? What's happened to their disposable income? So some of this is, again, we need to look at the whole picture and join the dots. This is not just about why is the profits not there? Because the disposable income for going out for a meal is not there, or the gym membership, or the going to a show, that disposable income level has been eaten away by what is happening in housing. The fact that there isn't bulk billing GPs available, that the childcare costs are, the fundamental needs that people have is eating into disposable incomes, particularly for those who are doing it toughest. But speaking to people on the doors, there's people that you meet that they're both working, good jobs, and they're struggling. So when it's starting to hit that level, it's not just those people that you would say are the most disadvantaged or marginalised or doing it toughest. This has really got to people that are both employed and they're having a tough time. So unless we sort out the fundamentals, we're not going to have that disposable income for people to spend.
And it's an important point to make that the rates of poverty in the ACT do not correlate to the rates of employment. There are people with two jobs in full employment who are really, really struggling. Chris Wallace, your questions.
I'd really like a sense from each of the candidates of something concrete and specific that they are proposing policy-wise that would make it better for business in the ACT and therefore better for the ACT economy. And the reason I ask this is, everyone's great at analysis, we can say what's bad, but the fact is we're a small part of a national economy, and that national economy is part of a big world economy. What can the ACT government actually do to make a difference specifically?
Jill, start off.
The first policy platform announcement we made was for 10,000 new homes bought and built over the next 10 years and clearing the 3,000 on the waiting list in this term of government. And part of that is actually creating a public developer again and actually investing in housing locally where that revenue will actually go back to government. So actually building out that construction sector in a really substantial way, building a whole new suburb at Thoroughbred Park. So that kind of significant investment, not tinkering, a really big investment, that would be one part of it. And the other part would be the kind of signals that we're sending on the solutions that we need to the climate crisis, to energy changes, to actually send that signal to drive the businesses that are giving solutions to that. So the GoTerras of the world, the other business whose name I don't know, who's managing to work out how to put plastic polymers back in through and recycle plastic and actually use virgin materials. How do we support those innovative businesses that are actually going to solve the problems that we actually have?
Let's go in order. Leanne, you next.
Look, there's no doubt that under a Canberra Liberals government, the message would be that Canberra is open for business. So that's why we've made an announcement for an investment into a National Convention Centre to bring more business into town, and obviously a stadium, love it or hate it. We need to have things in Canberra that bring people to town. Other than that, very practically, I would like to see, I've touched on regulation, but we need an understanding of where the burden is and how it can be eased, because there is no doubt, if I hear red tape one more time, and it's different for every industry, and the amount of businesses that say, if I could pick up my business and move it to Queanbeyan, 20 minutes down the road, I would be far better off. That is a shame. There has to be more things we can do with regard to regulation. The cost of doing business, that has to be looked at as a matter of priority.
Leanne Foresti.
Look, what we propose and what we're committed to is obviously looking at the payroll tax for the larger business, in particular in construction. Tackling insurance costs is a big issue as a small business owner. You're basically working just to pay your insurance off. Matching the funded innovation scale-up grants in order to incentivise businesses to start up, but also helping them to stay within the ACT and operating their businesses here. Another thing is that we're not optimising the skilled migration as best we can as a territory. We're the only state and territory that don't directly benefit from the Working Holiday Maker scheme because we're not known as a regional area, but we are for sponsorship and students, some student visas. What I see is that small businesses who turn to skilled migration as a resource for their business are being hit with the Skilling Australian Fund levy. So there's another cost that we have to wear on the chin. It de-incentivises people to turn to skilled migration as an option for their businesses. Back in 2022, the Labor government within their Succeed, and I'm going to read this, Skill to Succeed document. It was a business strategy for 2023-2026. We will seek an increase to the ACT's current allocation of skilled migration places and explore options for expanding our current program through a designated area migration agreement. These settings will provide additional flexibility for ACT employers to respond to our unique economic and labour market conditions because we are a microcosm. we don't have the same, we don't have the same positivity and the same, I think, opportunities as the other states and territories. We're not exploring that enough. We don't get backpackers here. We can't turn to them as a resource for small businesses to be working in cafes. That in turn would boost the economy for our tourism. So real strategies need to be looked at in terms of not only small businesses in constructions but in tourism and all the other industries that are flourishing currently or wanting to flourish within the ACT.
Martin, final word to you.
I think for me it's having the right infrastructure mix. So I think it's only really ACT Labor that is taking to this election campaign what I think is the right underlying infrastructure that the city actually needs. To get people into the city, as Leanne says, we need a light rail network. We need a light rail network that is well connected and that goes all the way to Woden. We also need a convention centre, which the Labor Party has committed to. We need a live music venue in the city, which the Liberal Party has proposed to ditch. And we need a stadium that can actually get built in the location that it's supposed to be built, which is out at Bruce, as well as building the new Northside Hospital. We need the right infrastructure in the right place at the right time, and that's what the ACT Labor government is committed to do.
And I've got the results in front of me as to how our listeners are going to vote. Now, they're percentages only. Your answer to this, if you think that any of these percentages are off, is to get on and vote onto Slido. But currently we've got 41% of people saying that they're voting for Leanne Castley for the Liberals, 31% voting for Martin Greenwood for ACT Labor as the best pitches, the best pitches for election. Jill Reid, 17% for you, 7% undecided or unsure. Leanne Foresti sitting on 3%. Round up the kids, Leanne, get everyone voting. We'll have another vote at the end to see whether you've changed your mind during the course of the debate. But I want to go now to how the future looks for Canberra's business sector and economy. Leanne Castley, to start with you, the Liberals are promising $2,000 off rates by not passing on a rate rise. You're promising a new convention centre and a stadium. Mm-hmm. You've said that you'll ditch stage 2B of light rail. That aside, these are multi-million dollar projects. How are you going to pay for any of this while preventing our credit rating from declining any further after we lost that point for the first time in more than 20 years? How do the sums stack up here? How do you do all of this and make savings at the same time?
Yeah, look, I can't wait to hear Martin's answer to that with the list that he's just come out with. So the thing about the convention centre is that, well, I should say everything will go through the normal Treasury costings, so as every party has to do when they make these large announcements. The stadium is under $1 billion. It's around that 800 million mark when we're looking at other jurisdictions and what they've built. We're also looking at the convention centre, similar costings, but what we know is that the selling of land, there's so much detail that goes into it as to how we've justified these, understanding that we are in a cost of living pressure. The infrastructure that we're proposing for Canberra will bring business to town. As I said earlier, it will tell Australia we're open for business and boost the economy. It means that we don't have to go to Sydney to see a concert. We don't have to go to Sydney to see our favourite football team. We're going to bring, wouldn't it be great to have the Matildas here? All of these things are done in such a way that we will boost Canberra's economy. And, yep, 2B of the light rail to Woden, that to us, when there are things like healthcare and education and more policing and community safety issues that need to be looked at and addressed, that's the reason we aren't going with the light rail to Woden, because we do believe that there are other issues and other priorities. And the priorities that we have outlined sell a great vision for a positive outcome for Canberra and bringing people to town to boost our economy.
Okay, so we don't continue the transport infrastructure, but we do invest in the stadium and the convention centre, both of which are in the long-term prospect for the current Labor government.
They are true.
But you'll expedite those, is
Yes,
that the promise?
we will, that's
and
correct.
pay for them.
And also we have a really great transport policy. Obviously, if there isn't a light rail, there must be an amazing bus network, which is what we've come out building, those electric buses that we need to have in town. It's such a crucial element to Canberra, making sure you can get to where you need to be when you need to be there and it not take 8 hours to get from Kaleen to Hawker.
Would you drop stamp duty and other tax reforms that Labor's implemented? Would you change those?
There's a bunch of things that we'll look at. You know, obviously there are things that we'll continue to move ahead with, but I don't have any answers on that for you tonight.
Look, and I know we'll touch on housing a little bit later.
Yes.
Jill Reid, I want to go to you. The Greens have been partners in this government's economic development plans, but you mentioned Thoroughbred Park and the housing issue there. Thoroughbred Park's executives have called you economic terrorists for the plans to take that large site for a new suburb, lose the entertainment industry and the racing industry that's based there entirely. Clearly that's not at all what Labor wants to happen. Tell me why that makes sense to the Greens.
Because the Greens have vision. This is a space that is used by a small number of people who can also go to Queanbeyan to still watch horses as they wish. It is already serviced by light rail, and this is space that means we're not pushing people to the delivering the housing that is urgently needed without pushing people out to the outskirts and coming up against biodiversity issues and transport issues and everything else that comes with that. So to actually deliver that many homes and a whole community and schools and everything else within that space, that is, and including public and affordable housing, that is actual vision that's solving the problems that we need, as opposed to saying, okay, well, we'll work around the racetrack and we'll put some private housing around the outside, which is a perfect example of the tinkering that we're talking about. So that to us is the priority. And Greens are a fan of sport. I went to watch the the Socceroos, at the stadium. And I'm a netballer, water polo player from a long time ago. So we do support a stadium happening at some point, but we can't be prioritising a stadium while we've still got people that don't have a house.
Martin Greenwood, on the question of where on earth the money is coming from, and of course we know that the pandemic and a number of other national factors also affected the ACT's economy and our credit ratings, but this is the government that lost those credit ratings for the first time in more than 20 years. How will Labor recover from that situation? Are there other solutions that we could implement to deliver major infrastructure for the future? Would Labor work with the private sector on public-private partnerships, for example? Could you expedite some timelines for those big projects like Next Stage Light Rail with more innovative business design, hand in glove with private investors?
So I think it's important. So we had the highest possible credit rating of any jurisdiction. So we're one of only a dozen sub-national jurisdictions in the entire world to have a AAA credit rating. So we're now AA. It's still one of the best possible credit ratings you can have.
Unbelievable.
So, I think the ACT government is in a solid economic position. One of the many things that have caused the Territory to acquire debt in recent times has been that the Commonwealth Liberal government stopped JobKeeper while we were still in COVID lockdowns. The ACT government had to take on responsibility from the Commonwealth of supporting a whole bunch of businesses in the city. I think the Chief Minister's made it pretty clear. I think we believe in making appropriate infrastructure investments at the right time, and for those to be reasonably paid off over a reasonable period of time. They benefit a whole range of community members over a long period of time. I mean, it's the Liberals that have actually committed to spend exactly the same amount as money as the Labor Party is committed to spend, but they've also committed to cut taxes. They must either be cutting services, otherwise they're acquiring more debt. It just doesn't make sense otherwise.
Leanne Foresti, I just want to take you to a slightly different area. We've seen some real scandals with wastage. We've had CIT and the extraordinary tale of the systems thinker, for example. How would you ensure transparency in decision making to help inform constituents on how public funds are made, on how decisions around business investment are made? How would you facilitate Canberrans' participation in the policy development, the implementation and reporting that back to voters?
So the Independents for Canberra are dedicated, we're tied to and commit to 10 principles, and that would be to make sure that the promises that we make to our communities, that we're going to deliver on them. We're free to disagree. We're also very committed to, well, we're basically there just for our communities. We're going to be working with the government on making sure that our communities' interests are at heart. What the ACT needs to understand that by voting for the independence for Canberra, it will secure a spot on the crossbench, which is absolutely missing right now. We need to be sitting on the crossbench to hold this government to account for the decisions they're making in the ACT around spending and infrastructure. And there's all these promises being made in relation to building this and building that and supplying 800 health workers. At its core, where are you going to find these workers from? Who is building these houses? Businesses are thinking of leaving the state to go elsewhere. So it's all these lofty promises are solely based on how many people we can actually get into Canberra to be able to build these important pieces of infrastructure. If you do not have conditions that are good for businesses, they're going to leave. So we, as a movement, it is imperative that we're sitting on that crossbench in order to, because we're not going to have enough to potentially form government, that everybody knows that, but we should be sitting on the crossbench to be able to hold these people to account. Just one more thing as well. As a small business owner, it's not okay that I have to feel the need to go to federal government ministers in order to solve local issues, and that's what I'm doing, that's what a lot of other business owners are doing. In my community, it should not be an option for me to even have to think about running for government in order to get things solved in my community. So we need to bring politics back to the way it should be, and that's through community consultation. It's through consultation with small business in order to be delivering on services that we absolutely do not have in the ACT.
Just a very quick question for you, Leanne, before we go to our expert panel. You're talking about how you behave on the crossbenches. You're independents. Are you independents or are you a party?
We're not a party. I absolutely disagree. We're all independent. We're free to disagree. Now, I knew this was going to come up because it's a question that we get asked a lot at the shops and things like that. We're here to represent our community. In its essence, an independent does not side with does not have any political agenda, does not have anything that sways us. We are there purely for our community. If we find that there are policy positions within Liberal, within Labor, within the Greens, we will consider them. Part of being an independent is working collaboratively with the government that's in majority, that's currently.
So we will or you will work with them?
We've all agreed. That's part of what our ethos is as a
Leanne Castley, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds.
So thanks, Genevieve. So just quickly on a few things that Leanne mentioned there. One of the first policies motions I moved in the Assembly was to start a small business ministerial advisory council. Now that's big words, but basically we need actual business owners to have a direct voice into government. And I would say, I don't know, we're pitching here, but look, honestly, if we want a change of government, then we need to be an independent in a seat in the Assembly is not going to change the fact that there will probably be a Labor government in power. And so I would encourage people to vote 1 to 5 Liberal.
Okay, I'm going to go to our expert panel. Devon Bowles, we've touched on housing and you've got some questions around that, particularly regarding housing affordability.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Would you agree with the proposition that the lack of social and lower cost housing is slowing economic growth by making it harder for employers across all sectors to attract and retain workers? And if so, do you have a plan to address how housing is affecting economic growth?
Martin, I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the Canberra housing market is a really interesting one. It has lots of different speeds and lots of complexities. When you actually look at the median income of a Canberran and the median house price, suddenly we actually have the most affordable housing market in Australia, but that doesn't actually fix the issue for the first and second income quintiles, which I'm sure you're particularly concerned about. In the last 6 years, we've built 800 new public housing properties with a focus on renewing a significantly an aged stock, and we will continue to make significant and realistic investments in public housing at a pace that can be delivered. we've committed to a really ambitious set of further planning reforms that we think will continue to deliver the missing middle, with more townhouses in RZ1 and with shop-top housing at local shops, providing a much more diverse mix of housing types so that people are able to access the market. We're the only party that's committed to continuously reducing stamp duty so people can actually get into the housing market. That is the biggest single thing that the government can do to make housing more affordable.
And I have a number of comments from listeners about stamp duty, and one from Sean. Jill Reid, I'll go to you with this as you're responding to Devon's question too. Sean says the current housing crisis needs more more out-of-the-box thinking to address the issues. Currently, laws in the ACT don't support the use of tiny houses on wheels as permanent residences. What's the out-of-the-box thinking that meets the kind of enormous pressure and difficulty that Devon's describing for many ordinary working Canberrans?
Well, thank you, Sean. Yes, because it is about the number of homes and building homes, but what kind of homes? It's not just what are we doing, but how do we do it? You know, are they actually insulated and have great energy so you've not got massive energy bills going on as well? I can actually give an anecdotal example. I'm actually part of one of the demonstration housing projects, which is actually looking at how do you do the missing middle. So in 2 months' time, I hope to be moving in there, and we'll actually be able to show you what an RZ1 block can look like with medium density that still looks like a residential RZ1 block. And we're sharing cars and we're active travel and all of those great things. You can actually design things differently to actually solve some of these issues. So I don't know the specifics about the tiny homes and how we navigate plumbing and all those good things that are probably...
Move into one, Jill. Move into a house on wheels and tell us what it's like.
I'm moving into a 100 square metre unit and then we're sharing space. So there's lots of different ways that, back to my circular economy point, it's design. There's a lot of ways that if we think differently, we can solve a lot of these in really interesting ways.
Leanne Foresti, to you.
Sorry, Leanne.
You never know.
Look, what I'm hearing in community are concerned parents who want to be able to help their children get into the housing market, and the attitudes have had to change. We need to be, unfortunately, and especially for my kids, they won't be looking at buying an 800 square metre block to be able to put one house on. But what we need to be doing, I feel, in order to speak to that issue is removing barriers from parents who want to subdivide and densify their property in order for their children or their grandparents or their mothers and fathers. You know, we need to be looking at really, really good solutions in ways to incentivise using the land that's currently available by homeowners. What we're hearing from community right now is that they are wanting to go into tiny homes. They are wanting to explore options. We're moving, like I said before, we're moving away from the dream of owning an 800 square metre block. And I think 70% of future homeowners are going to be titled in living in strata communities. So how that's an emerging thing that we need to really understand, or how do we incentivise people to be moving into places like that, but also making it available for people on low incomes who absolutely need to be off the streets. And homelessness in the ACT is just a nightmare, and we should not have the rate of homelessness that we're currently experiencing.
Leanne Castley, just quickly and finally to you before I move on.
Quickly, look, I would like to see the government be a bit more agile. I know in my electorate there was a new social housing development that was built and empty for years. Years, and people could have moved in and had access to good housing, keeping them warm, and it's just this slowness of government to take action when they need to. I also agree, if people want to subdivide or split up their land and build houses, great, but why do we have such a restriction on the size of the granny flat or whatever it is that they want to build? Make it within your pocket. We all know the planning laws are there. I think it's really important. Same, my kids, my son's just had a baby with his wife and they're down to one income, and it is difficult for all of us to look at our kids and understand what it is that they're facing and how difficult it is to get into the market. So all of these things.
Chris Wallace, politicians and promises. 3 of the people on the panel are not even elected politicians yet. What do you want to know about what you've heard on Canberra's future?
Well, one of the themes that's come through strongly for me is the labour shortages that are driving a lot of problems in the economy. Do you think that a tighter connection with a city of 5 million people, Sydney, would make a difference? Is there a case for a very fast train between Canberra and Sydney to expand our labour market, even if it doesn't mean more people actually living in Canberra. Views?
And there's a case surely for not treating the ACT like a weird hole in the map and acknowledging that we are part of a million plus strong southeastern Australian community. Jill, what do we need to do about that?
As someone who takes the Murrays back to Sydney about once a month for work, yes, it's an active discussion about how that might work and strengthening that connection. So look, that might be one of the solutions. I don't know the specifics on that, but making sure that when they are here, they've got somewhere to live would probably be another driver as well.
Martin, what do you think?
So I know that Andrew Barr committed a business case to the Morrison government. I think it was a very well put together business case. I think the Canberra-Sydney fast train link makes the most sense of all. We are the second largest city in New South Wales, amongst other things. But the Scott Morrison government decided that Sydney-Newcastle was where the money should go. We all know that that government had a particular issue with pork barrelling and particular issues around its choices of infrastructure investment. But yes, absolutely, I think a Canberra-Sydney rail route is absolutely should be a focus of investment, particularly from the Commonwealth.
Leanne Castley, we could also look at some deregulation, couldn't we? I mean, there are things that pertain, you're in Queanbeyan on one side of the border and 10 minutes away you're on the other side of the border and you're a different state with different regulations. That's not the reality of our lives.
No, and we look at that all of the time, whether it's legislation or whatever it is. I say we're an island within New South Wales. We have to be closely aligned in many ways to make sure that that works. I haven't honestly, I'm keen on building Canberra. Yes, of course, it's important to work with Sydney, quick in and out, very important. But the more housing, jobs and people that we can have move to town, that's my goal. It is just about building our town.
Archie, I'm going to come to you in just a moment, but I want to launch our final poll, which is whether you've changed your mind. If you're out there listening and looking, please go back into Slido and vote and tell us who you're going to vote for. And let's see what those options are. I haven't changed my vote. I'll now vote for Labor. I'll now vote for the Liberals. I'll now vote for the Greens, the Independents. I will now vote for another party. Tell us what you think. Archie, you get the final word on business and the economy. What do you want to ask our panel?
Thank you. It's probably an extension of a question that Chris asked before. There is no doubt that business is struggling. Business all over Canberra is telling us that they're struggling in terms of revenue, in terms of staffing issues, in terms of overall cost of business, regulation, all those things. But what can the ACT government do to influence business and business growth in isolation of what's happening in the economy generally? Clearly there are factors which are federal factors, and cost of living obviously is one of those. But what can the ACT government do specifically to be able to change the way in which business sees its place in the Canberra community?
Yeah, Martin, let me start with you, because it's all very well to talk the talk, isn't it, about this transition, about these changes. What's actually going to happen?
I think you look at some of the things that we have recently done that have only just started. So the Better Regulation Task Force, which is trying to keep really all of those good things, the regulatory changes that we made during COVID. What can we keep? How can we improve? It's only a few weeks ago that some of the nighttime economy measures have been introduced, reducing liquor licences, making it easier to run live music. Just today, the Labor Party has announced a $500 cost of living support payment for apprentices and trainees. So not only are they generally the group of people almost doing it the toughest in our society, but what it means is that they then stay in their apprenticeship, stay in their traineeship, and provide that skilled workforce pipeline. I think it's practical measures like this that the Labor Party has committed to, will do, and continue to provide just an attractive place to live for people to move to the city, which they do in droves.
Now, noting we are getting fairly close to time now, but Leanne,
yes.
Castley?
Yeah, look, a few of those initiatives that Martin mentioned were previous federal Liberal government initiatives, so I'm glad that they're finally filtering through. But what the government can practically do for business is to, as I said, it's a yes to business, rather than have an attitude of business and expect that business owners are out to do wrong or do the government wrong, or they're the exceptions, they're not the rule. Most of the businesses in town are families who are just trying to make it work, and I expect that we would have a government, the Canberra Liberals government would certainly welcome business and say, what can we do to make it work for you? Reduce that regulation. As I said, there's lots of things, but it's a yes to business.
Leanne Foresti.
One of the big things that I'm hearing from my community is, as an example, that people studying medicine currently, they're doing their rounds, they're doing their training, and they have categorically said they will be leaving the territory. We're seeing this trend of kids growing up here. It's a great place to raise kids, but what I'm hearing from around in my community is that people aren't hanging around. The youth, the people who are the most skilled, who have the potential to be the most productive and to be the most essential in contributing to our economy, are not incentivised to stay here for some reason. They're all going off to, whether it be training is better in Sydney, whether it be education opportunities, employment opportunities are better in a different state. So how do we find a way to keep these really highly skilled people here in order to benefit business?
You've got about a minute, Jill.
Look, just to reiterate, I guess what I've said before, that it is about joining the dots and thinking about not just business as a holistic, homogenous group, because that's not it. It's going to have to be a sector-based solution to really think about what are the issues in each of those sectors, if there are, and how do we overcome those. But really thinking about who is buying from those businesses, what do the supply chains look like, what are the barriers that way, how do we solve it? Really thinking right through the economy as a system, what is it that's causing those barriers if there are there, and how do we fix them in a holistic way, not in a we're going to group this group together and not actually see how it's connected. But I expect that it is going to then be part of the services delivery and education and all of those aspects that we need to bring together.
Okay, I've got the results from our Slido poll in front of me. Since participating in the forum, have you changed your mind about who to vote for? I will now vote for the Canberra Liberals, say 31% of our respondents. I will now vote for the ACT Greens, say 28% of our respondents. I haven't changed my vote at all, say 19%. I'll now vote for ACT Labor, say 13%, Independents in Canberra 6% and 3% undecided. Well, luckily everyone has a chance to have more information to hand to change or reinforce their views, because this is the first of 3 debates on issues and ideas around the 2024 election. Next week, same time and same channel, we will have all 3 leaders. We'll have the Chief Minister Andrew Barr, Liberals leader Elizabeth Lee and Greens leader Shane Rattenbury joining me here in the Lonsdale St Studios, along with Thomas Emerson from Independents for Canberra. That's on September the 18th at 6 p.m. So thank you to the Lonsdale Street Studio for producing this event so professionally, to the Region team and to all of you out there for participating with questions and votes, and to our expert panel, Dr Devon Bowles, Archie Sirimokos and Chris Wallace, for challenging our candidates. Given that roll call of leaders for the next debate, we are going to give you the opportunity to send in some video questions next time around. You'll need to make them short and snappy. I think they should be no more than 30 seconds long, filmed on your phone, absolute maximum, and don't make them detailed. Make them something that informs the whole Canberra community, everyone who'll be watching these debates, both live and right up until the election. And the address is editor@region.com.au. Identify yourself, editor@region.com.au. Thank you, everyone. It's been a fantastic, vigorous debate, probably a lot more courteous than the one that went on in the United States today, but this is Canberra. Thank you, everyone, for that. Thank you and good night.